I died the year I loved Max the most. Max locked me in the basement for a whole day and night to appease his first love. Later, a short circuit caused a fire, and I suffocated to death. In my dying moments, I saw a young guy frantically trying to break open the door with a chair. He rushed to my side, ignoring the fire scorching his clothes. Who was he? I can't remember. All I know is, I died in his arms. Even after death, my spirit lingered near him. The flames kept growing, yet he held onto me without moving an inch. I couldn't help trying to push his body, screaming, "Run! Are you just waiting here to die?" But I also knew he couldn't hear a ghost's shout. Finally, when the fire engines arrived, about a dozen firefighters carried him out. And so, I finally left the basement. Outside, the sun was bright. It was such a nice day. I saw Max pacing nervously outside the villa, asking anyone he could, "Has the girl from the basement been saved?" Oh, he didn't know I was dead yet. You see, I liked Max for 10 years, but even as the flames consumed me, he wouldn't dare rush in to save me. The boy still held my body. Without looking at anyone, he walked straight to a black car. He opened the door and put me in the passenger seat, even thoughtfully fastening the seatbelt for my lifeless body. Then, the car sped off, leaving the villa area. Like something out of a movie, the boy ran away with a dead girl. We left the city behind. The scenery outside changed to fields, villages, and then a beach. We arrived at the ocean, a deserted, undeveloped beach. Finally, the car stopped. He carried me out and slowly walked deeper into the sea until we both sank to the bottom. He said, "Kathy, I'm Ken. Do you remember me?" Could it be a confession? Confess, confess. I opened my eyes and found myself standing in my high school classroom, surrounded by classmates, all 17 or 18 years old. A girl nudged me. "Kathy, is that a love letter you're holding?" A crumpled piece of paper was in my hand, distorted by my grasp. On the envelope was neatly written, "To Maximum." I had traveled back to high school, to the day I planned to confess to Max. It was Friday afternoon, almost time for class to end. In 5 minutes, Max would walk into the classroom. I handed him the letter in front of everyone. What did he say back then? "Oh," Max said, "sorry, I'm not looking for a relationship right now." "No, that's not it." I shook my head. "We got it all wrong." Right then, Max walked in from outside. Someone shouted, "Max, Kathy's got something to tell you." It was that teasing tone of voice. I tore the letter in half, calmly saying, "It's nothing, they're just joking." Then, I tossed the torn paper into the trash. Max stared at my face for a while, didn't say a word, just returned to his seat. The crowd of onlookers let out disappointed sighs. All thought we'd get a show, but nothing's happening. Let's move on. I flipped through my books at my desk. School was almost over, and everyone was happily packing up. But I had this vague feeling there was something else I had to remember. Maybe it wasn't important to me back then, so it just got lost in my memories river. Until the teacher came in, and I snapped to attention. It was him, Ken. The class got a little rowdy as the teacher entered, murmurs of protest about leaving getting louder. The teacher frowned. Our school was a private one, considered elite and prestigious, with wealthy students that weren't easy to manage. The teacher motioned outside, "Come on in." Ken walked in from the doorway. Ken, I remembered now. He transferred to our school in senior year from another city. Ken always wore a faded school uniform, carried a worn-out backpack, standing out from the glamorous style of the rest of the class. Maybe that's why he rarely talked to anyone, often kept to himself, and sat alone in the back row doing practice problems. But his grades were top-notch, always among the top 3 in class, especially in science, almost perfect scores every time. Ken bowed slightly and introduced himself. "I'm Ken, transferred here from a high school in Boston." The teacher nodded and pointed to a seat in the back. "Sit there." Ken walked through the room step by step, slung his bag over the chair, and started arranging his books neatly on the desk. He looked a bit tense and unsure, but it was fine. At 17, we still had time, a chance to start fresh. When the teacher left, the class got lively again. Everyone turned their attention to Ken, curious. Ben, the troublemaker, walked over and asked, "Boston, my family has business there too. What's your dad's name? Maybe our parents know each other." Ken fiddled with his fingers, looking flustered. He stammered, "My dad doesn't do business. He's just. He's not digging coal, is he?" Ben cut him off, laughing. A lot of kids here learned early on to kiss up to the rich and look down on the poor. Many gathered around, drawn by the spectacle. Feeling more emboldened, Ben picked up one of Ken's books, sniffing theatrically. "It really does smell like coal." Disgusting laughter echoed around. I couldn't take it. I got up and dumped water from my cup on Ben's head. "Is your nose that of a dog's?" Ben, drenched, glared at me, fuming. He rolled up his sleeves, threatening, "Kathy, are you asking for trouble? Sorry, been there, done that. Maybe high school Kathy was shy and introverted, but 28-year-old Kathy wasn't. I smiled, yeah, bring it. In the end, there was no fight. Max stepped in, frowning at me. What's with you today? Time to go home. Being class president and from one of the most powerful families in New York, Ben wouldn't dare cross him. But seeing Max, all I could recall was the raging fire. Being choked to death by smoke was really unpleasant. I said, from now on, let's not go home together. I'm staying to study for the college test. Max snorted. Kathy, what's gotten into you? I pointed at the classroom door. Can you not disturb my studying? Lily from next door is waiting for you. Max, Lily, and I grew up together. Our families worked together in business and mingled in life. I used to think Max was really nice to me. He'd call me little sister Kathy. Turns out, he just saw me as a sister. The one he liked was always Lily. Lily stood at the door, waving to us. Max, what are you and Kathy chatting about? You guys coming or not? Max glanced at me again. He tapped my desk with his index finger. Physics is really tough, so I could help you with it over the weekend. Then he grabbed his backpack and walked towards Lily. In the end, it was just me and Ken left in the classroom. The classroom clock ticked away. Behind me, I could hear Ken's pen scratching away on the paper. I've always thought of Ken as the serious, nerdy type. But Ken, I wonder, how do you see me? I turned around, leaning on the back of my chair, studying him closely. Ken's eyebrows and mouth gradually blended with the face of the guy who saved me from the fire. He said, Kathy, I'm Ken, do you remember me? I guess I was staring a bit too intently, because Ken picked up on something. He looked up, eyeing me curiously, touched his chin, and cautiously asked, is there something on my face? I shook my head quickly. No. How awkward. To break the tension, I randomly pulled out a set of physics problems from my desk, flipped to a page, and placed it in front of Ken. Can you help me out with this problem? Seeing the problem, Ken seemed to relax instantly. He glanced at it and said, this one's actually not that hard. Easy problems aren't easy for me. My physics is terrible, always dragging my scores down in every test. He took out a piece of scrap paper, wrote down 2 formulas. Just like this, and then this. He asked, do you get it now? I just went. He chuckled and said, how about I help you with the basics? Ken must have figured out my true level from my confused look. He closed the workbook and took out a textbook, opening it to the start. Let's go through it from chapter 1. I realized Ken's tutoring style was way better than my rigid high school physics teachers, and way better than Max's. Yep, in my previous life, I always followed Max around, bugging him with all sorts of wrong problems. Max, can you help me with the kinetic energy theorem? Max, why can I never solve the last math problem? Max, how annoying must that have been for him? He'd always glance at me coldly. Are you dumb, Kathy? Can't do anything. Until the school security came knocking, standing angrily at the door, yelling at me and Ken. What are you two doing here so late? Why aren't you home yet? Do I need to call your parents? Ken and I realized it was nearly 8 o'clock. The school was about to lock up. We quickly packed up, apologized, and ran out. We ran all the way to the school gate. A car honked, pulling up beside me. The driver rolled down the window and called me, Kathy. It was our driver, Mark. Seeing I hadn't come home yet, he'd come to pick me up. Get in. Your mom's waiting for you to have dinner. Mark shot me a look, not sounding too pleased. I hurriedly opened the car door and looked back at Ken. Ken, it's late. Do you need a ride home? He shook his head. No, thanks. I live far away, in the west suburbs, out of your way. He had that awkward look and slightly awkward smile. Besides, there's still a bus at this hour. It's convenient. Ken waved goodbye and ran towards the bus stop. The west suburbs were far. The bus ride took over an hour. I'd only been there once. It wasn't fully developed, just old buildings, bungalows, and heaps of trash everywhere. I called out to him, Ken. He turned back. I asked, do you know my name? Under the street lamp, his face turned slightly red. I said, I'm Kathy. Remember that? Even though I've traveled back in time, none of my high school knowledge came with me. It's kinda tragic. Plus, I was never a genius, just average. So I had to spend my weekends buried in my textbooks. Almost every line was filled with notes. I wasn't smart, but I've always tried hard. While I was deep in thought, my phone rang, startling me. It was Lily. She sent me a picture. Library study room, a few books, and 2 cups of milk tea on the table. With an exasperated emoji, she said, Kathy, Max came to study on the weekend. I'm not here for academics. I'm so bored. Are you coming? Lily's a dance major. Max is a piece of work. Never figured he'd think of taking a date to the library. I replied shortly, nope. Lily didn't reply back. I continued studying. After a while, my brain felt like mush. I really missed that afternoon. Ken explained things so clearly to me. I opened my phone, found Ken's number in the class contact file, and dialed. He picked up quickly. I said, "Is this Ken?" "Kathy." He hesitated. I laughed. "I'm doing problems, and thought of you. Not disturbing you, am I?" We talked about a lot of things, like which teachers in class were the strictest, which ones were stuck up, and some school rumors and urban legends Ken had never heard. Ken kept agreeing with me and occasionally gasped at my exaggerations. He really satisfied my love for sharing stories. This guy, he's really kind. But why can't I remember where we ever crossed paths before? We chatted for a long while before hanging up. I casually checked my social media feed. Max, surprisingly, had posted something. Reviewed some physics today, quite productive, with a picture showing a corner of his physics workbook. Tons of likes and comments from classmates. "Max, help me out. Physics is killing me." Shocker, the genius is actually studying diligently. "Max, if you keep doing this, you'll hit 200 on the exam. Please, no more studying." Before Ken transferred to our class, Max was always first, scoring way higher than the second. Then Ken came along, and the competition began. Their scores were neck and neck. Classmates hoped to witness some epic rivalry, but unfortunately, as I recall, Max and Ken barely exchanged 10 words. They really weren't close at all. Having bugged Ken so much, I did feel a bit bad about it. So that evening, I dug around in the kitchen for some ingredients and baked a box of cookies to give to Ken as a gift. I used to mess around with these little things a lot. I'd even get Max to be my taste tester for the cookies and cakes I experimented with. But in another lifetime, I once went to Max's office and saw the cookies I had given him inside his drawer. He'd only eaten one piece, and the rest were just sitting there, some even going moldy. That's when I realized he didn't actually like the stuff I made. When my mom heard me tinkering around, she came downstairs to check on me in the kitchen. "Wasting food again," she said, frowning. "Max doesn't even like eating this stuff. Can't you come up with something else?" "Who said this is for Max?" "It's for my new classmate," I replied loudly, standing tall as I put the cookies in a box. I was really annoyed. My mom looked at me in surprise, commenting on how I'd changed. The next day during break, I turned around and placed the cookies on Ken's desk. He opened the box carefully, and his eyes lit up immediately. Surprised, happy, and a bit at a loss. "You're the first to make cookies for me, Kathy," he said. Wow, it felt really good to have someone appreciate my work. Just then, Max came out of the teacher's office with a bunch of papers. He happened to walk down our row and suddenly stopped, glancing at us and blurting out, "You made those cookies?" Huh. This guy comes out of nowhere and startled both Ken and me. Max stared at the box of cookies for a while before saying strangely, "Kathy, you once said you wouldn't just give away stuff you made to anyone." I scratched my head. Back in high school, when I was chasing Max, I might have said something like that. "Max, except for you, no one gets to taste the desserts I make with my own hands." Gosh, why call me out like this? Feeling a bit guilty, I lowered my head, not wanting to deal with him. Seeing I wasn't responding, Max turned to chat with Ken. "I heard you're good at physics." He placed the papers on the desk, casually picking a topic to talk about. Ken shook his head modestly. "No, just average. No need to be so humble," Max said, pulling out a paper from the stack. 98 points is really high. This was the test you took when you transferred, right? I went to grab some quiz papers from the office, and got this for you. I leaned in to look, and except for losing some points on the last big question, everything else was perfect. Max pointed to the lost points. "This is from a physics competition. Take another crack at it." In another lifetime, Max was always getting coached outside of school for physics competitions, eventually winning awards and boosting his college applications. Max noticed I listened intently and flicked my forehead. "Kathy, you keeping up?" I glared at him angrily. "Stop picking on me. I can be good too, you know." He laughed, and surprisingly, he seemed a bit softer. "Why didn't you come to the library over the weekend? Didn't I say we'd go over problems?" That was the first time I heard Max say something like that. But I shook my head. "If I need help, I'll just ask Ken. He sits right behind me." Max's expression froze. He looked at me, then at Ken, and didn't say anything, leaving with his papers coldly. After a couple of steps, he turned back, unemotionally saying, "Kathy, next Saturday is Lily's celebration party. You have to come, okay?" Lily's celebration party, a pivotal moment. Lily was an art student, and cultural courses didn't matter much as long as she passed art exams, pretty much guaranteeing her a spot in college. In another lifetime, She outdid herself. Several great dance schools offered her a place. It was a huge, joyful thing. Lily's dad booked a banquet at a 5-star hotel and gave her 2 days off to celebrate with friends. The only rule, no staying out overnight. Her dad was right to ask her that. She often hung out with all sorts of people. Lily booked a luxury suite at a KTV, and I went too. There were friends from our school, and some from her art class outside school. The atmosphere was rowdy and loud. Max and Lily were the center of attention. The two got egged on to sing a duet. Around midnight, my mom called on video chat. Lily, who was right next to me, saw the call. My mom said she went shopping with your mom today. Probably playing mahjong at your place right now. I turned my phone off. Don't answer it. They'll just try to drag me back. But I was a goody two-shoes. I answered the call anyway. And of course, I was greeted by both my mom and Lily's mom. Lily's mom's voice was loud. It's so noisy over there. Lily, do you know what time it is? Are you coming back home, or what? Just tell me where you are, and I'll send someone to fetch you. Lily rolled her eyes, complaining, Mom, you're so annoying. I just finished the exam. Can't I hang out for a night? I'm not going to get hurt. Both of them were stubborn. After a while of bickering, Lily's mom finally said, if you don't come home tonight, then forget about next month's allowance. Lily, a little rich girl at school, got a 50k allowance every month. That shut her up real quick. She grumbled about how her fun night was over as she ended the call. Later, Max took us downstairs and waited with us in the lobby for Mark to come with the car. During that time, Lily didn't say a word to Max. She was upset. During the call with her mom, she kept signaling Max, hoping he'd speak up, even if it was just to say he'd look after Lily. Lily's mom liked Max, thinking they might match. If Max had spoken, he might have convinced her, but he stayed aloof that night, ignoring Lily's silent pleas. So Lily's tiny arm couldn't win over her mom's iron rules, and she left with me. It's your fault, both of you. She stomped, fuming, neither of you is any good, ruining all the fun. On the way back that night, we got into a car accident. The police report concluded it was entirely our driver Mark's fault due to driving under the influence. Lily and I were in the hospital for 2 weeks. She was hurt worse than I was, with severe ligament damage preventing her from dancing for years. Lily's mom was heartbroken at the hospital. She grabbed Mark, insisting on making him pay. Mark took on the legal consequences and paid damages. But what good did that do? Lily didn't need money. This was a turning point. Without that accident, Lily would have stayed, and the three of us would have gone through high school normally. Years later, maybe Max and Lily would have ended up together. I guess I'd be sad, maybe, but I'd cry it out, then cheer them on gracefully, and go find my own path in life. But that car accident changed everything. Lily gave up the dance academy and went abroad for art school. Max and I ended up in the same city for college, and we'd hang out sometimes. Max knew about my crush on him, but the most he'd say was, Kathy, do you really think you're being fair to Lily? We were both wrapped up in guilt. He'd fly across China just to buy almond cookies from Macau for Lily and mail them to her overseas. He'd also stay up late, setting alarms to snag Jay Cho tickets for her when she wanted to go to a concert. Gifts for every holiday and anniversary. Never missed. After a few years, Lily came back to the country. Max rounded up old friends and threw a party for her. Late into the night, Lily sang a song, holding the mic, and out of the blue, she asked me, Kathy, after all these years since graduation, does your mom still make a fuss if you're out late? The air felt tense and silent. I knew she never truly forgave me. Max tried to intervene. Lily, don't interrupt me, Max. Lily had been drinking, and she sounded almost aggressive. Kathy, aren't you a goody two-shoes? Maybe you'd be happier locked in a little room by yourself. She clung to Max's arm, her tone sugary. I couldn't say a word. I wanted to argue, but felt like I owed her. Max sighed. He glanced at me, pulled out his keys, and then shut me in the basement with Lily. Lily patted the basement door, laughing. Kathy, we'll let you out after the party. I didn't know why their party lasted so long. I only knew there was a fire. In this life, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. Convincing Lily not to celebrate her exam success was impossible. I chose to skip it instead. If I stayed home, Mark wouldn't drive out to pick us up. Saturday night, Max called me. When are you coming? The background noise was loud. I barely heard him. I'm not going. Busy with work, I replied. Suit yourself, Max coldly retorted after a pause. I hung up, thinking my hard-working image was officially established now. Close to midnight, I checked downstairs once more. Mark was video chatting with an old army buddy in the kitchen, drinking and eating. He spotted me, waving. Kathy, still up? I hesitated, then said, Mark, you're getting older. Take it easy on the drinks. In the living room, A few women were playing mahjong, deep in the game. Lily's mom had just won a round, riding that lucky streak. Checking her watch, she suddenly remembered, oh no, Lily's out tonight. I wonder if she's back. I should call her. But Lily's phone was off. Call again, still nothing. Her friend joked, think she's skipping town. Come on. Lily's mom chuckled while reshuffling, oh stop, as if I'd stiff her. I lay on my bed, watching time tick away on the clock. Outside, it was just an ordinary peaceful night. I drifted into sleep. The next day, my mom woke me. Kathy, breakfast is ready. It was only 8. Groggily, I grabbed my phone, opened up social media. A classmate posted, do the campus cutie and genius make a good couple? The photo was of Max and Lily, both asleep on a couch, Lily's head resting on Max's shoulder. Must have been a late night, and they got tired. The snapshot seemed to scream gossip, and of course, it went online. The teasing comments poured in. Knew something was up with those two. Campus power couple. Seeing it, I snapped awake, sat bolt upright. No crash happened. Lily stayed at the party. Everything was fine. Thrilled, I quickly liked the post. I also commented, good for them. Minutes later, the post vanished. Then my phone rang. It was Max. Kathy, he oddly said, last night got wild. I went to sleep midway. Missed out on the fun after. Oh? Why was he telling me this? Max chuckled, thought you'd show. If I knew you weren't coming, I would have skipped too. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. After a pause, I said, if there's nothing else, I'm off to breakfast. See you at school tomorrow. He replied. Even though the post disappeared, rumors spread like wildfire, especially since lots of classmates were at Lily's party. On Monday at school, it felt like whispers were everywhere. But I stayed out of it. Midterms were just around the corner. Ken transferred in, and this was his first big exam here. When the teacher announced ranks, she built up suspense. Our class has a new dark horse. Competition pushes progress. She paused. Ken, ranked first in the grade. The class went nuts. It was a first for Max to not be on top in nearly 3 years. Ken, the new guy Ken, doesn't even talk to us. With college test looming, yet another genius shows up. Though I knew Ken's skills, I couldn't hold back my excitement. I turned, eagerly mussing up his hair. Ken, you're amazing. Ken's hair was a mess, but he just smiled softly. My desk mate Emma seemed annoyed, gently elbowing me. Kathy, keep it down. See how upset Max looks. I glanced over at Max. He sat by the wall, watching me and Ken goof around. His lips tightened, eyes cold, almost statue-like. I shivered slightly, realizing my insensitivity. Max was the top student for so long, and suddenly being second had to sting. And here I was, celebrating. Salt in the wound, right? I cleared my throat, toned it down. Finally, Max's gaze shifted away. I snuck a deep breath. Thanks to Ken's help, my scores improved a lot. Now on Fridays, I'd stay back 2 more hours, borrowing some brain power. Unexpectedly, Max joined us too. As soon as the bell rang, Lily dashed to the door of our classroom. Max, time to go home. She waved at him, just like before. Max didn't move though. He didn't pack up his stuff either. Sitting at his desk, he said to Lily, why don't you head home first? I'm gonna stay and study a bit longer. That caught everyone's attention. Max, seriously, you've been accepted with lowered scores, and you're still this committed. Max had won an Olympiad competition, which got him into his dream school with a reduced score requirement. Even if he messed up in exams, he'd still meet the cutoff easily. But Max ignored them. Once everyone had left, he just moved his books and sat next to me. I was puzzled. Max replied, sitting here brings me closer to Ken. It makes it easier for us to discuss problems. I was at a loss for words. Should I scoot over and give you two some space? Before I could comment, Max pulled out a question and started talking with Ken. Ken, got any quick ways for this problem? I think I'm overthinking it. Turns out, it was a problem I had messed up on my exam. So, I decided not to chase Max away. I just kept my mouth shut and listened to the two geniuses discuss their academic insights. By the end of evening study, I felt like my brain cells were about to transcend. Max and Ken often had different approaches to problems, and their discussions often led to new insights. Around 8 p.m., Max tapped my head with a textbook. Kathy, time to head home. I snapped out of it. Yeah, let's go. Ever since I told my mom I'd stay back on Fridays to study, she arranged for Mark to pick me up 2 hours later. Ken still insisted on taking the bus, never letting me give him a ride. And now Max wanted in too. Even though he's from a wealthy family, they didn't send a car this time. Max rubbed his nose and shamelessly asked, let Mark give me a ride home. Remember when we used to take turns having a car pick us up after school? I rolled my eyes. Max, can't you be like Ken and just take the bus? You know, Do your part for energy conservation and all. Max wasn't buying my logic. How about I call your mom and tell her you left me stranded out here in the dark? I really gave up on him. We sat in the back seat. Mark drove silently up front, and for a moment, it felt like there was nothing to say to Max. City lights blurred past the window. Suddenly, Max asked, Kathy, with college test coming up, have you thought about which city you want to go to? His question caught me off guard. Time to think about it. I wanted to head south, to see the sea. But in my past life, because Max chose a university in the north, I followed him there. I don't mean to say the city was bad, just that it didn't suit me. Max saw I didn't reply. He quietly added, when you figure it out, tell me. He took a deep breath, like he was making a big decision, staring at me. I want to go to the same city as you. I didn't get it. Haven't you already decided on a university? I asked. Top school with a reduced score requirement, plus Max had connections there. Most of his family's friends and relatives graduated from there. No reason to change schools now. Max shook his head. He didn't answer my question, just repeated, Kathy, we need to be in the same city. Honestly, staying in the same city as Max wasn't my priority. Later, huddled in bed, I texted Ken. Ken, have you decided on a university yet? Sent it, then thought it was a dumb question. With Ken's grades, he could get into any school he wanted. Ken replied fast. Haven't decided. What about you? I want to go somewhere with the sea. I typed while imagining it. Funny, me too. This guy, totally copying me. In my last life, I studied hard in high school mainly to end up in the same place as Max. This time, I want to strive for me. In the second half of senior year, the atmosphere in class got serious. The countdown to college test loomed over everyone. Even in our private high school, the principal organized a pep rally, inviting the top students to speak and share study tips. Predictably, Max and Ken, being the top students, were chosen as speakers. I remember that pep rally being incredibly dull. In my past life, I lasted only until Max's speech. After his eloquent talk, I couldn't sit through the rest and snuck out for a walk. I had no recollection of Ken's speech. Maybe I missed it while sneaking out. Seems like I missed out. Lucky for me, I get a second chance. This time, I focused all my attention on waiting for Ken's turn. But even after Max spoke and most others finished, Ken still hadn't appeared. A student organizer passed by, so I grabbed them and asked, hey, where's Ken from our class? Why hasn't he gone up yet? They frowned, clearly annoyed. I don't know either. Called him a bunch, but he didn't pick up. We had the schedule set, and he just messed it up. Seriously. That's when I realized something might be up. I jumped to my feet, and ran out of the auditorium. Where could he be? I pulled out my phone and dialed Ken. Just like they said, it kept going unanswered. The school's huge, and I ran around the buildings like a headless chicken, pressing Ken's number on repeat, trying to reassure myself, he's not a kid, he'll be fine. Until I reached the gym. Suddenly, memories from my past life flooded back. I remembered, in my past, after listening to Max, I sneaked out of the auditorium for a walk. By the gym, I heard strange noises, a mix of shouting and commotion. Driven by curiosity, I peered in through a window, seeing some classmates surrounding someone, throwing punches and kicks. They were spewing insults. Back then, I was overcome with justice. I barged in, pulling the guy out of their grip. Do it again, and I'll report you to the teachers. I even angrily left them with a warning. In hindsight, that guy was Ken. I broke into a desperate run. Racing to the gym, I swung the door open. The scene was just like before. Ken trapped in the center, with our classmates, including Ben, all there. Isn't your family just into coal mining? You think you're all that just because you study well? You want to give a speech on stage? I'll make sure you don't. I can't stand students like you who think they're so great. What skills do you have anyway? After spending time with Ken, I realized that his experience in class was tougher than I thought. In our kind of high school, cliques are everything. Ken has a gentle nature and transferred in the middle of the year. He's a top student from a poor family, so he isn't part of any group. He often gets left out, even bullied. In this world, at least he has me as a friend. I can't imagine how lonely his life was in a past life. Maybe because of this, he is sensitive to even the slightest kindness. I merely pulled him out from Ben's group, and it meant a lot to him. I'm not scared of these rich kids like Ben. Ben saw me and blocked my path. Kathy, what are you doing, playing hero? It wasn't like this before, especially with students leaving the assembly. Some noticed us and peeked in. Imagine that, such a big scene. Ben got more excited seeing the crowd. Kathy, I've suspected something's up with you too. So, do you admit it? If it were any other student, I wouldn't mess with Ken today. But it's you. Admit you like him, and I'll apologize. Our school loves gossip. The crowd sounded off in unison. Who is that? It's Kathy from class 4, and our grade's number 1. Ken stood up, tugging at my hand, looking pale. Kathy, he smiled weakly, forget it, don't stress. With all these people, what can he do to me? Despite this, I'm someone who can't resist provocation. So what if I like Ken? I declared. Is it illegal to have a crush? Which school rule says we can't date? Saying it wasn't that tough after all. Everyone didn't expect me to own up so easily. For a moment, there was silence. Even the viewers had no words. Ben finally broke the silence, stammering, Kathy, you're brave. What's going on here? Causing trouble. A sudden voice came from the back. This isn't a college test. You want a record. The crowd made way. The person looked familiar. I realized he was Larry, the student council president. Larry pointed at Ben and his gang, speaking sternly, about to graduate. Still bullying your schoolmates. Read the school rules. We don't tolerate bullying. Stopping bullying is a huge rule at our school. Though behind the scenes, it happens a lot without reaching the school authorities. This time, Ben's the example. Larry pointed them out one by one. You, and you, come to the office. He then said to someone behind him, Max, I'll tell the teacher. You coming? I saw Max with Larry then. He'd been in the shadows. I hadn't noticed. Max shook his head, pointing at Ken. Let Lynn come too. He's involved. Can explain things better. Larry nodded, gathering everyone to leave. Ben shouted, help. I don't want to see the principal. That's not your choice, Larry replied, tapping his head. With the main act over, the crowd began dispersing. I wanted to wait outside the office for Ken, but as I walked a few steps, someone grabbed my wrist. Max looked at me steadily. Kathy, come with me. I noticed how pale he was, like he was holding back intense emotions. For what? I whispered. He pulled me without letting me refuse, and pushed me against a corner. Taller than me and standing close, his presence was overwhelming. Kathy, he frowned, calming his voice. I get wanting to help Ken, but you could have called a teacher, or me. You didn't need to do it this way. Ah, I see. He thought me admitting I like Ken was just a quick fix to help out. I laughed. Max, you're wrong. I truly like Ken. Max seemed stunned by this. He stood there, speechless. After a while, he looked pained, hesitant, and almost desperate, pulling out a letter from his pocket, torn in pieces. He showed it to me, asking, Kathy, are you lying? What did I do wrong? You couldn't like Ken. If you did, why write me this letter? A letter I wrote to Max, but I had torn and tossed it away. How did he get it? I looked at him puzzled. Max gave a bitter smile, admitting, yep, I fished it out of the trash. I wasn't sure how much I liked you. Afraid high school romance would hurt my studies. But I never thought you'd like someone else. Seeing the letter, I felt relieved. My crush on Max ending like this isn't bad. I grabbed the paper from him, tore it even more, opened the window, and casually tossed it out. The pieces caught the wind, impossible to piece back together. Max's face changed, rushing to the window, holding the frame. Kathy, he gritted his teeth, half outside. Max, from the moment I dumped the letter, you should know, I don't like you anymore. Unless something crucial comes up, don't come finding me. Like you said, we've got the college test coming up. Time to study, right? The next day, as I walked into class, everyone was watching me. Well, no surprise, I kept cool, took my seat, and opened my book. But it's already morning study. Why isn't Ken here? I tapped Emma's hand, asking, where's Ken? Emma glanced at me. You didn't hear. Because of what happened yesterday, Ben's the bullying example. He has to apologize publicly this morning. Ken's probably with the teacher for that. We were chatting when suddenly the loudspeaker in the classroom went off. It was the voice of the dean. A very serious bullying incident has occurred at the school, and the impact is quite negative. It's necessary for the students involved to make a deep reflection. Ben and his buddies looked like deflated balloons, completely losing their swagger. They all muttered apologies. The classmates listening were all snickering with their heads down. I couldn't hold back either and burst into laughter. The dean asked Ken if he accepted their apologies. Ken quietly replied, honestly, I never really paid attention to them. They are not at my level, even if they are arrogant and jumping around. So what? I couldn't help but want to clap for him under the desk. But in the next moment, he mentioned me directly. Kathy, I always felt like the confession should come from me. I like you. I was stunned. Emma spat out a mouthful of water, wide-eyed, and exclaimed, wow, you too, spreading PDA in front of the whole school. The consequence was that Ken and I each had to submit a reflection, but now we could openly hold hands on campus. Although young love might seem like a distraction, My boyfriend's the top of the class. How could I not make the most of this advantage? Those challenging science problems became more lively with Ken's company and explanations. The whole second semester of senior year didn't feel so daunting. Time flew by. Then suddenly, I realized I hadn't noticed Max for a while. He no longer stayed for self-study on Friday afternoons. Even when he ran into me and Ken on campus, he'd quickly lower his eyes and walk past. It seemed he was really trying to respect my words and stopped bothering me. When the college test results were released, I was at an internet cafe, teaching Ken how to clear lanes in a game. A sudden commotion erupted in the class group chat. Someone messaged, "Help, the college test results are out." Ken and I immediately logged off, abandoning our teammates to quickly input our ID numbers on our phones. My scores came out pretty fast. I scored 30 to 40 points higher than usual, totally nailed it. I was over the moon and turned to see Ken's screen. He seemed to have an issue, a big one. The page showed 0 points. My hands were shaking as I asked softly, "How could this be? Did you forget to write your name or mess up your ID number?" Ken shook his head and pointed to a small line of text at the bottom of his screen. It said he ranked in the top 50 in the province, with more details available for further inquiry. I hugged Ken in excitement. Next to us, a gaming kid took off his headphones and gave us a puzzled look. "What's got you guys so hyped?" I blushed and softly said, "Ken, what school are you gonna pick?" Ken laughed, messing my hair a bit. "Let's decide together." Later, a prestigious Southern university offered Ken a full scholarship and the freedom to choose his major. I got into a nearby teacher's college. Everything seemed to fall into place, except for Maximum. A few days before the application deadline, Max's dad called. "Kathy, could you do me a favor and persuade Max to stick with the original plan of going to Harvard?" Harvard was the target school for Max that had lowered its standards for him. Apparently, he hadn't done as well as expected, missing the cutoff for business programs at some of the top national universities. But with the points Harvard offered, he could still stick to the plan. Honestly, I didn't understand why Max's dad reached out to me. First, Harvard is one of the top universities. What's there to hesitate about? Second, what advice could I, an outsider, offer? But since he was a senior, it was hard to refuse. I hung up and dialed Max's number. It rang for a while before he picked up. After hesitating, I asked, "Max, you haven't decided on a school yet?" Max's voice sounded tired. "No." For a moment, I felt a surge of frustration. "What's going through your head? If not Harvard, then where else? Settling for an average university would be such a waste." I wasn't sure if I was being too harsh. Max was silent for a while before he slowly replied, "Kathy, I'm afraid if we're too far apart, you'll forget me. I wanted us to be in the same city for college. So that was it." "But Max, there's really no need." In a cold tone, I said, "If you do that, I'd lose respect for you. Do you want us to not even be friends?" Max ended up at Harvard. Lily cleared her cultural exams and got into a dance school in the same northern city. Ken and I made it to a university in the south. Everything ended well. No car crashes, no heartbreak, and no major disasters. Our families remained close, celebrating together with graduation parties. The parents even planned to send us off at the airport for our flights to college. At the airport terminal, Ken and I were on one flight, while Max and Lily were on another. One headed south, the other north. We said our goodbyes at the check-in gate. I held onto Ken's arm, handing him a backpack. Lily tried to hold Max's hand, but he subtly shifted away, staying distant and cool. He looked at me, opened his mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. I waved at them, goodbye. Maybe we wouldn't see each other for a very long time.